There we go. Okay. So, yeah, welcome everyone again. As I said, I'm Lorna McCulloch. I work in the community development team at Borders Community Action, and we're going to talk about the Community Mental Health and Wellbeing Fund this evening. This is the second year that we have administered this fund, and it was administered prior to Borders Community Action with our colleagues in Dumfries and Galloway for 3 years prior to that. So it's quite a well-established fund in Scotland from the Scottish Government. We will be, bear with me, just move that out of the way, that's helpful. So the fund is, for those who are aware, it's not changed that much since last year. There's a couple of features that have changed, and we'll run through those. But essentially, the budget is the same. There's 320,000 for the Scottish Borders for this fund allocation this year, and it's aimed at improving the mental health and wellbeing of adults across the region. So that's age 16 and above. It's specifically aimed at community-based initiatives that help and support mental health and well-being, with a particular focus on prevention and early intervention. That's not to say that projects around sort of therapy or a mixture of therapeutic approach are out of scope. They certainly aren't, but the focus certainly is on community-based activities to keep people well from that early intervention and preventative approach. It supports both national outcomes and local priorities that some of you might be aware of through the Community Planning and Health and Social Care Partnership. So the fund aims and outcomes are particularly to tackle mental health inequalities, and we'll touch on that further into the presentation. It's to address issues such as social isolation. I always struggle to get my teeth around that one. Loneliness, suicide prevention, and poverty. And as I said, it's aimed at community-based activity, and therefore priority is given to the smaller community-based groups that are operating in our communities in the Borders. And that's to help strengthen the community connections, and I'll come on to this, and particularly resilience as well. So having a bit of a legacy and a sort of sustainability around the benefits of the activities is certainly an aim of the fund. So the fund priorities, for those of you that are familiar from what we offered last year, we've added a fourth this year. So we've obviously got the suicide prevention and the loneliness and isolation, the poverty and inequality, and we've added the resilience building this year. And this is to support those activities that provide that lasting legacy around, the strategies to help people cope better, which might be around physical activity or nutrition and those types of things. So as I said, the first three we were included last year. This is a continuation, and the resilience building is something we've added this year to cover those types of activities and keep them in scope. So eligibility, as I said, this is aimed at community groups. So any voluntary or not-for-profit type organisations, that can be an association, a group, a club, a charity, a community interest company, community benefit societies, and all those things, community councils and parent councils are included in that scope, but there are special conditions around that. So as it says there, the key word for applicants is bringing people together. That social connection is very much a priority for the fund. So the types of project that the fund is looking for is, It can be new or existing projects. And there really isn't a priority on either of those. But what we would say is for an existing project, we would always look for how you are improving or making it better, and including your community and how to arrive at that. So how you get feedback from your project and the people that benefit from it. How have you used that feedback to improve how you're delivering the project? So while it doesn't need, as I say, it doesn't need to be new, but new projects are welcomed. It can absolutely be expansion or an improvement or just making the project better and demonstrating. The key is to that is demonstrating in your application how you're making that better year on year. So it's certainly to address at least one or more, but certainly at least one of the fund priorities. And the application does ask you, if your project does address one or more of the priorities, we ask you to choose the main one. And that's certainly within the application. So the project is largely based on revenue, so it's largely to cover the costs of delivering a project rather than looking for capital costs, but you can include some capital costs. So for example, if the space that you run your activity needs some capital spend to improve it, to make your project, to improve your project. So whether that would be improving a space, a kitchen space, for example, and you needed some capital to make that happen, you can include that in your application, up to 5,000. And here's the main difference between last year and this year. The Scottish Government are running a pilot project to be able to measure the benefits of multi-year funding over funding that's given year on year. So, and to enable that to happen, they've selected the Community Mental Health and Wellbeing Fund, amongst others, to pilot a multi-year fund approach. And therefore, the funding this year can be applied for and allocated for up to 2 years. So there are options, and I'll come on to the different options, but you can apply for 1 year or you can apply for 2 years of funding. And there's different amounts in those categories that you can apply for. So that's the main difference in the fund this year. So the list of what can and can't be funded has not changed. You can see on the screen in front of you what's included. So equipment is included, events, community space hire, of course, staff costs, training costs, of course, transport, running costs, volunteer expenses, and as I said earlier, the small capital spend up to 5,000. I won't run through the list. You can see the list of what can't be funded, and this is all included in the guidance document that's on our website. So here's the tiers, as we're calling them this year, of how much you can apply for. So in order to make the pilot worthwhile, the Scottish Government have asked us to allocate at least 80% of the fund to multi-year funding. And that's really so that they can get some really meaningful data out of the allocation and the benefit of the multi-year fund compared to the singular year funding it's been previously. So we have kept a proportion of the fund available as tier 1 for 1 year of funding only, because we recognise that some groups, that's the approach that they'll be most comfortable with. So you can apply for up to 5,000 for 1 year of funding. And the remainder of the fund is for multi-year funding. So tier 2 is for anything between 5,000 and 10,000 per year. for 2 years, and tier 3 is anything between 10,000 and 20,000 per year for 2 years. So there is a proportionate approach, as we had last year, on the amount of funding that you get on what sort of the strength of the evidence of need that'll need to be demonstrated. And with the larger funding requests, we will look for, particularly if there's any partnerships, and a focus on partnerships is certainly welcomed for any of those larger applications. So I'm thinking if there's anything I've missed in that. No, I think that's us. And the same principle applies to the evaluation, I should add. So it will be proportionate. So the smaller the amounts, the less evidence would be needed for the evaluation, which is just at the end of the year. There isn't an overly onerous process for that. So these are some of the considerations that applicants should be mindful of. The Creating Hope Award scheme, for those that haven't heard of it, is from NHS Borders, and that's for community organisations to register as an organisation that is aware of a mentally healthy and suicide-safe community. So it's really like an accreditation, a locally run accreditation from NHS Borders. I think us as an organisation in Borders Community Action have practiced what we preach, and we've just recently gone through the process. It's not massively onerous, but it is something we would encourage any organisation to sign up to. The ways to be well in the Scottish Borders, again, this is from NHS Borders. The guide is linked in the guidance document for the fund on our website. You can read more about those, but certainly any sort of application we would expect to align in some way to the different ways to be well in the Borders. And then finally, the ALICE system, a local information system for Scotland. This is obviously a national database that the Scottish Government, who provide this fund, expect organisations to sign up to. And it's really a way of putting the activity and the service that you provide online, so that there is a way for everyone and anyone, not least the Scottish Government, to be able to see the range of activities that's going on across the Scottish communities. And it's worth saying at this stage that I think it's fair to say it's not a massively user-friendly database in its current form, but we are continuing to promote it, because I think the hope would be that in some way it will be a feed into a more local database, which is what is welcomed and we're working towards in the Scottish Borders. So the more data that's collected through that system, the more likely it will feed into and improve a more local database for the Scottish Borders that will hopefully look a bit different to that. So monitoring and reporting, as I said earlier, there is only one annual reporting requirement. It's through an online form, but we do welcome pictures, case studies, quotes from service users or clients or people in your community that have benefited from the activity that you offer. All of that is welcomed. It's not massively onerous, and we welcome, conversations about if anyone's got any concerns on it. It is quite a light touch depending on the size of the grant. As I said, it's proportionate, and it really just is about there are numbers, but as I said, you know, we do ask for numbers of activities and beneficiaries, but certainly we welcome, as I said, pictures and anecdotes and feedback from anyone who's been involved. The fund also certainly aims to inform policy decision making, both at a local and national level. So there will, it says may, there will be opportunities for projects to showcase what you're doing. And we would always encourage you to get involved in that. I was actually just at an event today in Hawick, and there was an organisation lead there. Actually, she leads 3 different organisations, who said that she welcomes funders to get involved in their feedback and see the benefits that they're offering, and to partner in showcasing what she does, because ultimately improves what she's doing and helps her to attract more funding and offer the service more. And I really like that approach. Whether we've got the resource to do it in our small organisation is another matter, but certainly it's something that we would encourage. So any opportunity to showcase what you're doing, I think is just benefits everyone, and you know, means more people are aware of what you're doing and can get involved. So I mentioned earlier that there is an equality focus, and there are various categories involved that priority support will be given to with this funding, and you'll see them on your screen there. This is from the Scottish Government. This is a sort of priority from the Scottish Government, and certainly any groups who are focusing their or targeting their activities or services to any of these priority groups, we would seek to capture that and feed that back through Scottish Government. And certainly it's part of the application. It does ask if there's any targets. What we did notice last year through applications is, with the borders being, you know, a very rural area, with a relatively small population for the area that it covers, a lot of the groups are not targeted, and that's okay, because obviously we don't have the dense population that some of the urban areas in Scotland have. So don't think that you have to target a specific group. I know it's saying that priority is given to these particular ones, but certainly in the borders we know that often groups just welcome everyone and anyone who wants to get involved, and certainly that's the theme that we recognised last year, and that's okay. So the application process itself is very much the same as last year. The timescales are very much similar. It's an online application. Anyone who would rather look at a paper copy, we can arrange that. They just need to get in touch with us. The fund opened at the beginning of August, so it's been open for a few weeks now. It closes on the 26th of September. Decisions are made during the month of October, and communicated, crucially, to the groups that have applied in December. So everyone will know if they've been successful or not before Christmas. And the funding is actually paid. It's sent out in sort of during January, early February at the latest. And that's with a view to projects starting in April 2026. So one of the things we found, I don't think we were hugely clear on last year, was the start date for when projects could commence. So this year we've tried to be clever with the application, so you can't put a date in earlier than April 2026. So if you're having trouble with that, you'll know why. So this is certainly for projects to start from April 2026 to run for 1 or 2 years. So the process that's involved we absolutely recognise that a lot of the applicants for this fund may or may not be experienced in funding applications. So the first review of the applications is by us in Borders Community Action. We'll review the applications to make sure, A, that there's no missing information that's needed, B, that you're an eligible organisation and that your project meets the criteria of the fund. And we certainly look to make sure that all of the information is there, ready to be passed to an independent panel of people that will score each application. So there are a number of different categories that we ask the scoring panel to consider, and once they score each application, that's when we go back and look at the scores, and recommendations on funding is derived from those scoring. So the panel is made up of a mixture this year, which we're really pleased about. We've got a mixture of statutory and community representatives, as well as people with lived experience of mental health. So we feel we've got a really good mixture across those three different categories, and we obviously have our local knowledge within the organisation as well. Even though we're not scoring, we can certainly inform the panel members of any, fill in any gaps that if they've got any queries on the local organisations. So we in Borders Community Action and the independent scoring panel are not the final decision makers. So we make recommendations to the Health and Wellbeing Community Planning Partnership, which is made up of various statutory representatives, and they're the ones that make the final decisions on successful applicants. And as I said earlier, the decisions are communicated before Christmas, which hopefully gives enough time for those projects that are being offered an award to plan to start from April 2026. So how we can help going forward, you'll see the information on the screen there. Any queries can come through our info@borderscommunityaction.org.uk email address. You'll find if you go onto our website, which is Borders TSI or Borders Community Action, both will take you to our website. You can look at our training and events tab, and there is an opportunity to book a one-to-one session with us every 2 weeks on a Thursday. We would encourage anyone who wants to discuss the fund further or has any queries that they're not comfortable to ask today, then that opportunity is there to book a one-to-one session with one of us. If you can't make Thursday, we'll try and, don't worry about that. We'll just contact us and we'll try and arrange something else. This is the second of the online sessions that we've delivered, and we don't have any further plans to offer any more unless there's a demand. But certainly the fund is open for another 6 or so weeks, something like that. So there's plenty of time to pose any queries or questions to us before putting an application in. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and I'm going to stop recording as well, so that we can open the session out to any questions. So if anyone can raise their hand, if they can do that digitally, that would be great. And if we don't notice, we will try and get to you, or you can put your question in the chat. So I'm just going to stop recording now.